Fantastic faces and voices. I know we have some folks that are on audio, so
Here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Wednesday, just in case anyone forgot what day of the week it is. Welcome to SMA's first live event. We appreciate all of you joining on what I know will be a very interesting discussion around a hot topic. Now, before I introduce our panelists and hand things over to our host, I'd just like to review a few housekeeping items. I think we're all becoming quite masters at Zoom, and to ensure that we have a most effective call today, just want to run through a few things. For starters, if you'd like everyone to know where you work, you can actually rename your screen name. So if you want to take a moment, if you put your cursor on your particular video square, right-click it, there should be a blue tab at the top with the little 3 dots. If you click that, you should have a drop-down menu that says rename. Does anyone see that? In that, when you click rename, you can type in your company name after your name. So let's take just a couple of seconds there, just so we can all have an understanding of what world we're from. Granted, some of our names are long, it'll get cut off, but it'll give us an opportunity to see a little bit of it. Great. Okay, secondly, if you could please mute your audio, either at the bottom left hand of your screen, you'll see the little mute button, or if you're in gallery view and you don't see that mute button, you can actually go to that little blue section of your square and mute it from there. This will just help to minimize background distractions when the panelists are speaking. And we absolutely will open this up to the floor towards the later half of this conversation. So if you also click the little arrow next to your audio button, and you'll see the option, click same as system. That will ensure that the right microphone is connected with your audio and your screen so that we do hear you when you chime in later. On that note, if a thought or a question comes up during a panel discussion that you don't want to forget or to share or ask, feel free to type it in at the bottom middle of your screen where it says chat. There's a little chat box there. You can open it up, type in a note or a question, and I'll make note of it as we go along. Okay. Now, before I kick things off to Jerry, our host, I want to ask Mike Vore, who's the president of SMA, to share a few words.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sure.
Yeah, just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. I know right now with everything going on, the strain and pressure from COVID-19 has put a lot on our plate as HR professionals, and I think this is a great way to get away from that for an hour and spend some time discussing another really important topic. Want to thank Lisa Panarello and Jerry Crispin for all their hard work in putting this together for everyone. For those on the call that are not familiar with the SMA of New Jersey, we're a New Jersey-based SHRM chapter, specifically focused on staffing and recruiting. We host about 4 to 6 programs per year, in addition to some more casual networking events once that's allowed again, in the central New Jersey and northern New Jersey area. Membership for the SMA is free, as long as you're a member of SHRM. And if anybody has any interest in becoming a member, feel free to reach out to me or Megan Scaramia. Both of our contact information is available on the SMA webpage. Also wanted to let you know that we have a date coming up in late May where we're going to discuss another very relevant topic of video interviewing. So more details on that on our website or on our Facebook page. But you can look out for that in late May. And with that, I'll kick it back to you, Lisa.
Great. Well, thanks for mentioning both Jerry and I and saying my name. I often forget as a co-host to say who I am. I'm Lisa Panarello. I'm the program director of SMA, and I'm also the founder and CEO of a private practice, Careers Advance, and I specialize in professional training development and self-branding. That being said, let's get this party started. Our guest panelists today are Cheryl Lewandowski. She's a talent acquisition manager of Deloitte Technology Consulting. We also have Tara Noonan Amram, the global head of talent acquisition at Marsh & McLennan. We also have joining us from Ernst & Young, Dan Black, who's the Global Recruiting Leader, Jessica Pena, Director of Workforce Management at Atlantic Health Systems, Bernadette Palumbo, Senior Vice President of HR Business Solutions at Sonepar, and last but certainly not least, Jennifer Tracy, Vice President of Recruiting Solutions at Spectrum. I'm excited to hear their insights on gender parity and what is being done and what we can do to help level the playing field. Who's going to lead this whole talk today is our host, Jerry Crispin. So for those of you who haven't had the pleasure to meet or know him, he's the founder of SMA and the founder of Career Experts. And he's a lifelong member of ATAP, the Association of Talent Acquisition Professionals. Jerry, take it on.
Cool. Thank you, Lisa. Did you mention Cheryl? Because I do know that Bernadette had indicated that she could not make it, but
okay, yes, Cheryl was the first one I mentioned,
okay, that's
and
good.
I probably didn't
I want to
update
make
that
sure
list.
because
Absolutely.
I asked Cheryl to sit in when I knew Bernadette could not, so that's
Yes,
kind of
great.
cool.
No, thank you for that clarification.
So this is an experiment, and we would love to be able to do more of these because obviously there's not going to be a lot of face-to-face meetings for a lot of different kinds of chapters, and so I would love to make this as conversational as we can. It is being recorded so that we can share this now with our members and certainly beyond from that perspective. But the subject today, if for all of you who have are able to see it on the screen, I hope you are, is essentially about gender parity and equality. And I want to tell a quick story about before we get involved in just asking some of the questions. My passion around this came out of a number of things, but one of the most recent one was about a year ago in a meeting with about 50 talent acquisition leaders. We were talking about diversity and talking about some of the issues. And one of the things that came up obviously was that, you know, half of most workforces approximately are women. And the issue about gender equality seems to have been on the table for a long, long time. And I, just as a side fact, August 18th of this year, it will be 100 years ago that the 35th or 36th state approved the vote for women. That's an interesting thing. It's 100 years ago that women were supposed to be somewhat equal, and then somewhere around 1977 was the Equality Act that took place. So that's 40 years ago. And in this conversation, there were plenty of notes from people about what they were waiting for. They were waiting for the leaders in the company to get it and to be, you know, and to lead, if you will, and have it come down that we're going to get more involved from a gender equality point of view, or a racial equality, or whatever the equality is from a diversity point of view. And then there was another conversation about waiting for the hiring managers to get it. And then it went on. And in most cases, it had to do with somebody getting it. And finally, somebody said in the room, "I'm tired of waiting." And the place exploded. And people stopped talking about what they're waiting for and what they could or should be doing to step up and change something themselves or influence that. And the other piece of that is all of the studies about gender equality, the least of them said that it was going to take 70 years before that would be real on a global basis. And 208 years was the Harvard Business Review study. And I'm sitting there going, you know, in 70 years, I'll be over 150, or I might be close to 150, I'm sorry, over 140. And I don't know if I can wait that long. I think that would be a problem. And I don't know if you'd add 70 years to any of your ages, but I don't think you want to be there either. So what needs to be done in order to make something happen? So some of the folks who've been active in their companies, they know that their companies are trying to move the needle. I asked to kind of join us to have a little bit of a conversation. They were already introduced. I'm also totally enamored of one of the indexes out there, and there's a number of them, but I would say that the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index has blown me away in a couple ways, because over 230 companies in 2020 are participating and providing data that allows for us to understand a little bit about how that area is measured and moving. And these 230 participating firms have as many as 7 million women within their ranks. So that's kind of an issue. So there are 5 things that Bloomberg does to measure or to get companies to share data to measure that. And the first, and that's really what I want to have a conversation about. The first of those has to do with folks in the pipeline. And let me just focus in on one part of that, which is at the leadership level in your companies. One indicator that we're moving the needle is to either show that there are female leaders increasing in that area, or that there's efforts being done to ensure that within some reasonable period of time that can happen. So, just to start off, Tara, I know that Marcia McClennan has been doing a lot of things in relation to that, but could you talk a little bit to how Marcia McClennan looks at improving leadership for women?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've made a concerted effort to take a look at is making sure that we're not doing it kind of ad hoc, that we're actually taking a systematic approach. And so we have a head of total rewards that has been systematically leading all of the analysis around the world, so that we're not just saying it's an Americas thing or it's an Asia thing, but we're really looking at pay equity, pay practices, people coming in and out of maternity leaves as part of the overall view of closing the gap on pay equity. We've reported as well some of our in some of our areas of doing this. We have a legal responsibility to report this as well, so we want to make sure we've got a keen sense of it. The other thing we're doing is we're really starting to leverage our people analytics function to really understand what are their career paths, and are there certain career paths or experiences that are having an impact in, by default, having an impact on the pay gaps. And so that's another new body of work that we're looking at, that we're really educating leaders on, making sure that we've got fair and equitable pay practices as well. And then some of the resource groups have been actually teaching courses on, negotiating, right? So how does a woman make sure that they're putting themselves in for internal opportunities in the best light for jobs where, we all hear the anecdotes. Men will apply for jobs when they're only 50% qualified. Women want to be 125% qualified. So how do you also get women to take more risks, right? So that they're going for jobs, which could then put them in a different pay category, and really starting to talk a lot more about transferable skills. So taking a systematic approach to compensation, and then really kind of creating a little bit bolder practice around when people are looking for jobs, even internally, are they taking more risks as well? You're on mute, Jerry. Jerry, you're on mute.
I'm on mute. I'm sorry. That's a good thing. I'm glad it's me. All right, Jessica, how about you? What's happening there?
I mentioned that, when you think of healthcare, people typically think, well, healthcare generally has a lot of women, right? So we don't have a women in healthcare issue, but we do have a women in healthcare leadership issue. And that's something you'll see across the board, across healthcare companies. There's only about 30% of the C-suites that are represented by women. Here, you know, for us, what I think really helped was it started with our leadership. So our CEO, Brian Gragonali, I always get the last name, but he, probably a few years ago, he took an effort in changing this. And here at Atlantic Health System, you know, he hired a CEO who happens to be held by a woman today, as well as our chief HR officer. Both are women, and then continued with bringing in a number of female leaders within the organization. So today, we are surpassing, I'll say, a lot of our competitors. We're at 52% of our C-suites are represented by females within the organization. And then when you look at our entire population, or in general in healthcare, it really should be a higher number, because typically within healthcare, it's probably about 80% are represented by women, but not the leadership roles. So similar to what I believe Tara just mentioned, we do take an effort, and we actually have monthly audits that our total rewards team does. So they do monthly audits by departments, not the entire organization. So they have a rotating department check that they do to just check, and they're looking at the jobs. They are considering ethnicity as well. They're looking at gender. They're looking at years of service as well. And they're just checking to make sure that we're closing the gap on the gender pay equity issues that we have, or I'll say historically have had. And then there's a number of other efforts that are going on. You know, when it comes to benefits, of course, being in healthcare, we should have excellent benefits, and benefits that are attractive to women. And even now, when we see with this crisis going on, we have even increased those benefits, where a number of companies have been able to cut back. We haven't been able to do that because we need our people more than ever right now.
Okay.
So we're actually, yes, exactly. We're giving folks $100 a day to pay just grandma, right? To keep grandma there to watch the kids so that they can work. Our childcare centers that we have on site, they're still fully operating. So there's a number of things that we do to make sure that we're intentional with keeping our women in general within the company, and as well as growing them within the organization.
Thank you, Jessica. Jen, how about you? Oh, there we go. I unmuted you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So I would say there's three main things that we are focusing our efforts on. Certainly through our business resource groups, we actually have mentorship happening, as well as some training opportunities that go on. We participate in an industry-wide effort. It's facilitated with WIC, which is Women in Cable Television. And so it's done by Mercer, and it's every biannual survey that actually looks not only at our current workforce, but what the flow through looks like going forward. So we continue to benchmark as an organization. We also do the same thing. We have, as an organization, we came together 4 years ago, and we set benchmarks for 2023. And so we have both women and people of color benchmarks that we want to hit in our leadership realm. One of the other areas in particular that's a focus for us, particularly around women, though, is in our field technician role. So that is generally a 90% male-dominated field. And for many years, there was a specific reason why that was. But now with upgrades in equipment, so ladders don't weigh 80 and 90 pounds, we've been able to make some moves on that, but we have some specific programming around that particular role. So those are the things I would mention.
Cool. Cool. Thank you. Dan.
So, yeah, as the recruiter on the line, one of the things that I'm constantly asked is that goes in line with some of these questions is how are we increasing? What are we doing? And a lot of times, in a lot of probably all of your organizations, it's well, we need to recruit more. We need to bring more in. And so we spent a lot of time on that, obviously, making sure that we're sourcing appropriately and across a diverse spectrum of sources. But what we were finding, particularly at the executive level, so partners and executives and the like, was that it wasn't actually the pipeline issue that a lot of people kind of defaulted to, but actually it was within the process. It was making sure that people that we were pipelining, a good percentage of which in most cases 50% of which were women, were getting the opportunity that their male counterparts were getting. So what we started taking a look at is, okay, where we have a good strong pipeline, where is it in the process that we're not getting them over the finish line, if you will? And one of the things that we did, which has been, in my view, one of the most powerful changes we've made, particularly here in the U.S., where we started this, was several of our practices that certainly are eager to improve the percentage of women in leadership roles, have decided that the final step in the executive recruitment process, which is typically the vice chair or the leader of the practice, instead of saving that person for the end of which is what we typically do, you meet a recruiter, you'll meet a manager, you'll meet, and so on down the line. Several of our leaders in those practices have said, I want to see any qualified women candidates first, not at the end. And by putting that process much further up in the funnel or in the recruitment process, it's actually made a real difference for us. And so I think everyone knows that there's in any large organization or any organization, there's the potential for unconscious bias or preferences and traditions that people have had. By putting the decision maker further in advance of the process, we've seen a significant increase, candidly, in the number of qualified female candidates that are coming through and making it through the process. So that's just one example, but I think the overarching lesson learned is, if you're wondering how to address this issue, ask the right questions and start looking in the right places.
Got it. Thank you. And Cheryl, how about Deloitte?
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Well, Deloitte has been a pioneer, I like to think of, in the inclusion matters overall. I mean, in the late 80s, I was reading an article saying that we noticed that we were losing women like crazy at the management levels and above. So we decided at that point in time we needed to start doing things about it. So we developed a variety of different things as the years have progressed. And some of those things include having a Deloitte Women's Leadership Launch, which is something that people who are in select MBA programs can participate in to network with Deloitte leadership, people in the industry, thought leaders, and other women who are powerful and industry experts, to network with them. We're kind of starting as young as we can. We also have Deloitte International Women's Day Conference, which is held each March. And that's for really campus people, women who are in campus, and that enables them to network and develop their brand and network with industry experts as well. We also have an alliance with Girls Who Code, and that's kids that are in high school and middle school, where we do a couple week long course to educate students who are interested in STEM careers and things like that. But, in terms of our leadership, I mean, we were the first professional services firm to have a female CEO, Kathy Engelbert, you may have heard of. She's one of the most powerful women on many lists. She was our CEO from 2015 to 2019. Also, our chairman of the board, Janet Foudy, is obviously female. 8 of our 20 people on the board are female, so it's 40%. So we're really leading by example. We have lots of initiatives. We have an inclusion council in every office that has regular meetings, gatherings, social, abilities to socialize with other women and get to expand your network. So we're really trying to capture people as early as we possibly can, going back, educating young girls on Deloitte and what they need to do to be successful as a female. 50% of our campus hires are female, so we try to keep that even between male and female. We funded 125 needs-based scholarships directed towards girls who are interested in growing their careers in STEM, and also we have a whole inclusion group that focuses, clearly all the big professional services groups or companies have that, but we have a ginormous inclusion group that ensures that we participate in job fairs and all these different types of activities to attract and retain females at the higher levels. So that's kind of what Deloitte is doing.
That's, I mean, all of you are doing really interesting kinds of things. And any one of you could spend an hour probably detailing a list of a lot of those. There's a couple things about the folks at the top, though, particularly in when you're not only doing it internally, but also externally. Dan, you mentioned one thing that the CEO basically said, I want to see them first. Basically, it may be a preference, but downstream you may have data that suggests that has some impact in terms of choice and selection. I'm not so sure that would be. I would want to train somebody to prefer the first one that they see, or the last one. But the reality is that's a key issue. There is one study that I remember most of us are familiar with that basically said if you have a slate of 4, 5, 6 people that you're going to present, when it comes to diversity, if you're presenting a single one, the perception is more token. And if you present 2 or more who are diverse, it becomes much more of an equality issue in relation to that. Are any of your companies using that as an SLA or a standard in terms of how you set up your slates? Because I think it may be transactional, but it has an influence if you do it consistently. So I'm just curious.
So this is Tara. We've just started to introduce this, but we really started with a couple businesses and making sure that the business case for diversity was part of that conversation. It also means that we're trying to pipeline for some of the forward-looking roles over a longer period of time, because as we've explained to business leaders, and we've only had success in a few cases so far, everyone has to be open to both waiting for talent, right? Because let's face it, a lot of the in demand, every company is looking for diversity in the full definition of the word. And so people don't have to come to your firm, right? You have to make a very compelling argument for why somebody should leave where they are and come here. And so part of that is really explaining to leaders that they have to be part of the selling process, right? So we've done unconscious bias training for leaders. We've done the business case for diversity in a couple pockets. We do have leaders across the firm that are saying, like, if somebody shows up with a one-to-one hire from their own networking, that's not good enough. We want you to produce a full slate. So I think we've got a few true believers who are seeing that there's a difference, but it's a long road because people then we're now starting an effort to really leverage some of the full capabilities in Workday to be able to track diversity even on confidential requisitions, to be able to show who we're talking to, how they're doing in the process, what the funnel is looking like. And it does take discipline, but also gearing leaders up to say, this could take time, but your time is an investment as well. So it's a slow progress, but we're getting there.
Got it. Anything anyone wants to add?
Jerry, the only thing I'd add on that front is last year our executive search team and our D&I team partnered together to create a talent pipeline for some of our technical roles, which we know everyone's competing for from a talent perspective, but making sure you know kind of where those folks are in the marketplace is key, so you can track them so that when you do have an opening, if you don't have one now, you have that ready to go so that you are able to produce, because, to Tara's point, you can't always wait on some of these roles because they're critical for your business, yet at the same time, you want to be thoughtful and proactive when you can.
Cool. I just want to point out that because there is a broad base of companies currently committed to making a difference, that there is data now showing that the needle is moving. May not be moving fast enough, but it certainly is moving. And in the 250 folks who are engaged in the Gender Equality Index, there's a 40% increase in executive level positions that are held by women. And the board obviously is growing as well. And I think that's an interesting piece to know, because it does give someone confidence if you start seeing the data that the efforts being made to step up are in fact happening. We talked a little bit about the gender pay issue. And there's one particular statistic that gives me some trouble, and that is that only a quarter of the companies that represent the Fortune 500 have actually done the calculation to determine whether or not there is a disparity in pay on a gender basis. And obviously, if they haven't done it on a gender basis, they haven't done it on a racial basis, they haven't done it on any kind of basis. So there's a concern in our society, particularly, that that says, you know, if you uncover all this data, then you're going to have to do something about it. Well, you know, the point is that suggests that they're, at least to me, that those companies have decided they're not going to commit, so that they really don't want to know the data. In other countries, and I know Dan, Jen, you know, Tara, you, many of you, and Cheryl, you're within, you're global. In fact, and in other countries, you know, it's gotten to the point where you legally have to demonstrate that information. And clearly in the United States, it's happening state by state. But fundamentally, we don't have a requirement that you do the calculation and publish it, as in the UK. So if I go to the UK for actually for Deloitte or for EY, I can look on their website and I can see the exact difference by the UK's calculation anyway, that you're required to use, what the disparity is in pay. And I'm just curious, are any of you publishing in the United States and using in your recruiting that you not only do the audits, but this is what the audits are showing, and this is the progress we've made? So do you actually use it to answer questions that I might have if I ask that question? And I'm going to start with Dan.
I knew you would. So, you know, the short answer is that yes, we are doing that calculation at EY and in the States, and in, as you mentioned, you know, it's not a regulatory requirement that's compelling us to do that. I don't believe, I'm not sure if we have that posted publicly somewhere at this point. The first overarching review that we did for the States was just in our last fiscal year, so I'm not sure if that's published yet, but what I can share with you is that it was done across the Americas, focused in the U.S., where we have a big portion of our population, and there were you know, and there were actions taken as a result of that. So cool. Like lots of other things, I'm sure Deloitte is very similar. I'm a big fan of their work in the space. It's not the regulatory that should be driving this. It should be, you know, for doing the right thing and getting the best talent. Candidly, I mean, that's what it really comes down to. So that's something we are doing in lots of places, regulatory requirements notwithstanding.
I think regulatory is going to drive it if, in fact, we don't drive it ourselves collectively. And we're never happy with them driving it, because they're going to require that you calculate something by some obscene kind of thing that just will drive you nuts. We need to have better standards in terms of how industries can get together and do it. And I got to tell you, I'm an old guy who's not really recruiting much, but if I worked for any one of you, and I really was or wanted to be a world-class recruiter working in your operation, I would want you to share that information with me so that I could use it to my advantage. And I would certainly think that teams could come up with appropriate scripts that show how we're leading the way in doing the calculation and in trying to do something about it, even if we haven't gotten to 100%. There's only a few companies that claim that they do it often enough, they do it well enough that they can claim 100% parity in pay and compensation. But certainly I would use that. If I worked for one of those companies, I would use that like crazy in terms of ensuring that we brought in quality and high, the best possible talent, for sure. Any other comments from Jen or Tara or?
So I just have one other comment. I mean, I think while, you know, the closing the gap is clearly another thing, not from my experiences at Marsh & McLennan yet, because I've only been here a little bit over a year. But, you know, earlier in my career, I know that it wasn't just about pay. You know, as a multinational company, we often had women that may have been working on another part of the world where their culture and the customs had things like women sat at the back of the room behind a curtain.
Right.
And I remember being in one of the town halls and, you know, the women said, well, that might be the local culture and custom, but we're working for a multinational company. We want to be treated like all the other women around the world. Right. So it really kind of forces a discussion about not just pay boundaries, but behavior boundaries. I think one of the incentives of working for companies that are perceived as being given equal opportunity in all aspects of the job is that they get the benefits of what these companies are doing in promoting all aspects of a career for women as well. And that doesn't necessarily always just show up in the indexes and things, but it is another lens that job seekers are looking for, I think, as well.
I agree. I mean, it's included in things like inclusive culture, as well as the sexual harassment process issues and pro-women brands. So there are, as I said, there were 5 areas that Gender Equality Index works on, and I think pay is weighted in one area. It often is the one that's easiest to do the calculation, or in some cases hardest, but fundamentally it's certainly not the whole thing. And so building that kind of brand is going to be key. But I got to tell you, those of you who have global responsibilities, that's not so easy because different cultures are at different places in all of this. And explaining that to your employees in this country, I think is as important as it is to work slowly but well in terms of changing that in other countries.
Hey, Jerry.
Oh, yeah.
So one other thing I was just going to mention too, you know, not just from a global, but just considering the type of services you provide, it's important in that aspect as well. So, you know, for us, you know, when we look at our population and the communities that we serve, it's important to do the compensation analysis, but also diversity as well, because our ability to be effective really is impacted by how diverse our organization is. So we do audits both on compensation and diversity as well. It is not publicly shared, but we do have conversations with the leaders when we find that there is an issue. And I think with being proactive, again, it has really helped us with being proactive with the audits that we do, the monthly audits that we do by department. It has helped us. And this is a practice that our Total Rewards lead has put in place over the past year.
So let me ask you a question though, Jessica.
Yep.
I think it's great when companies are doing that. And now the issue is who has access to that data? Obviously, it's very sensitive from a compliance point of view to be sharing that publicly. But the question is, you know, as a diversity officer, you probably do know. Would you share that? Because I'm passionate about TA leaders as well as TA team members, as well as the recruiter in the trench, understanding transparently what's happening in my organization.
Right.
And so that data to me is something that I care about and would want to know about in a way that helps me to recruit.
Right.
Because people are asking me more questions. If you have a really high quality, high powered candidate, who happens to be female or happens to be Black or happens to be diverse in some other way, they're dumb if they don't ask a question of how many people are like me in this place.
Right.
And you better have some capability of answering that question with more than I don't know.
Right. No, I agree. I agree. And that's something I will say was unique for me. When I started, I've only been here, I'm just about to come up to 6 months. But in the HR leadership meeting, and that's when I heard about that we were doing these monthly audits because an update was given. And it is reported out to the HR leadership team. And then, like I said, if there's a particular department with an issue, it's discussed with the leaders for that organization. So I will say, talent acquisition does have some visibility from it being discussed with, HR leadership. And I do believe the team is pretty proactive in helping to fix some of the issues that we've seen. And again, part of that comes from our CEO. He has taken upon himself to create roles if he needed to do that in order to help fix some of these issues.
Yeah, I know. I love it. All of you are probably way beyond the average company out there in terms of how you share data.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to know that many of your peers are very uncomfortable with sharing any of the kind of data that might be uncomfortable to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that we have to kind of grow up if we're going to talk or walk the talk on transparency as we move forward. When I poll our members, many of whom are extraordinarily progressive, about whether or not recruiters even know in the pool of candidates what the diversity component is, half of them say they do not give the recruiters access to it, which means that the recruiters have to work around that problem because they still have to create a slate that is diverse. So they know the data is behind the scenes, but they know they have no access to it from what they think is an important compliance issue. But these are companies that are focused totally on trying to improve the needle. So I just think that there's an opportunity for this disconnect to change in the future. And so let me ask each of you, what kinds of things do you think, either for your company or your peers, need to be working on to get to the next level, to move this needle just a little bit more? And I'll start with Jen.
Okay, let's see. Hold on a second. I have to unmute again.
You're good.
Oh, I'm good. Okay, thank you. So I think that many of the things we've put in place, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of 3 years. So in many ways, as an organization, we're in infancy. We've put in place. So some of the things that you put up on, I think, was bullet 4, was around the benefits. So, I look at our CHRO as being very progressive, and a lot of where he's spent his time is really focused on big ticket items. So meaning we actually did increase our parental leave policy as one of his major initiatives. We also increased our starting minimum wage. So now, wow, that impacts both men and women that come to the table. We, announced last week that we're going to move to $20 an hour by 2022. I look at it as those big ticket items carry the most weight in moving those numbers more broadly. The other flip side to that, though, is making sure we stay focused on the leadership area, both internally as well as external hires. And I feel that the tracking that we've put in place, the partnerships we've put in place, all will help drive us towards the desired results that we're looking for. Last year we had 2 really significant C-level hires that were women. One was Stephanie Michko, and she is our Chief Technology Officer, and it's awesome to be able to say that in the marketplace. We also hired a Chief Communications Officer that was also a female, and those 2 were critical hires for us. So we just have to keep pushing forward. In many cases, in some ways, it's the bigger, broader programs that make the big difference. In some ways, it's the little nitty-gritty things that you have to constantly keep working at. No different than what Dan alluded to earlier. That one change in decision-making will probably make the difference for him long-term. So, thanks.
Tara, how about you?
I think for us, we're in agreement. We've recently merged with another company that was largely based out of the UK and Asia. And as part of that process, we've been looking to harmonize a lot of our benefits around the world. They were a smaller company in size, but had definitely some different practices. So we're really trying to align those things. And it has included a complete review. And how do you then be equitable in a global environment where some of the programs are not as meaningful in another part of the world? So we're making progress. And I think, we also have 4 business units that have very different demographics of worker groups. So it's interesting to see, in some of the consulting practices where a lot of our recruitment is early career, they're more focused on a different set of benefits and access to different things than other groups that have more professional mid-career workers who are looking for different types of things as part of their overall benefits and resource programs. So we're trying to balance everything around the world, but it's tricky.
Got it. How about you, Cheryl?
Hi there. Yeah, we have at the risk of sounding like I'm on a commercial for Deloitte, I think we have some really outstanding attraction mechanisms for.
All right, Dan will get his chance at it.
We're in this together, Jerry, I promise.
Yeah, we have like 16 weeks of parental leave, and that could also include leave for taking care of an ailing parent. I'm not a parent myself, but I have an aging mother. And, it's good to know that we have that type of leave available if, I need to take time off to take care of my mom as she's getting older and in assisted living and so forth. We also offer up to $25,000 for infertility treatments and 15 additional thousand for prescriptions relative to that, 25K in adoption. We also offer gender reassignment surgery reimbursement. I don't know exactly how much that is, but we do have tons and tons of programs like this, wellness, all kinds of things that are very appealing to women in the workforce. And we're very good at advertising that. You can find it all over Google, even though you might not be able to find salary information, you can definitely find that. But I think one area, nothing's perfect. And I think one area that Deloitte as a firm, just on the more granular level, need to get better at is accountability. Although we do have an inclusion group and they're, taking part in different, career fairs and Alpha and NABA and things like that, and WIT, Women in Technology, we need to hold the individual accountable, individual people that comprise our different groups. Sourcing, how many people did you reach out to this week? How many people do you have in your pipeline that are female? How many people do you, have in the offer stage, et cetera, et cetera. I think we need to have someone that's accountable in each segment of our practice. And that's something that I'm not finding that we have yet, that I'd love to see increase, and something we have parameters around, so we can really make sure that every single person that's a part of the talent organization has some metric that they have to be held accountable for. So that's one thing I'd really like to see change. But other than that, I think we're doing a fantastic job with what we're offering. It's just a matter of bringing more people to the table and into the interview process.
Interesting point.
Yeah.
Dan?
Yeah, I would agree. And programs like, what Cheryl's talking about are exactly, those are great ways to systemize, right? Your commitment to this. And so I think programs is certainly a big piece of the solution or moving towards a better future. And, we offer a lot of those same things, probably more, but, about the same, a lot of similar programs. But the other thing I would say that's equally important is in the day-to-day. We had a really robust discussion on our last advisory council, inclusiveness advisory council, around programs, can get the wheel moving. It can be something that you can point to. It's something you can talk about, both publicly and internally. But what is the day-to-day that you can keep coming back to? And for us, that's been PTR. Fortune did a piece on this, preference, tradition, or requirement for any decision, promotion, a new account, hiring. Are you making that decision based on a preference? Is it tradition? We've typically hired this person. Preference being like, there's nothing wrong with you saying, oh, I went to Binghamton, you went to Binghamton, we have a connection. I'm a guy, you're a guy, we have a connection. Or are you making the decision based on the R, the requirement? What's required to get this job done? And if you can put every decision day to day through that lens, why are you making this decision on this person to promote them, to give them an opportunity, to hire them, et cetera? It's a really, really powerful construct to make people who, especially those, and this is the vast majority in my experience, are might be unconsciously biased towards any particular group, to rethink what their decisions are. I think that starts to get ingrained in the culture and the day to day. And so I think it's a combination of powerful programs and offerings and support, but also that how you get into the weeds day to day with your people.
You both sparked something, a memory to me. There's two things. One, I was just recently asked, when are we over this diversity being a critical issue at the top of the list for TA leaders? And I said, I doubt if it ever will. I said,
my lifetime.
Because it is, in fact, a day-to-day conversation that's going to be critical unless it becomes legitimate for us to challenge each other around those things in a way that adds value to the business, because we're doing it that way. That's when we're in a maintenance mode, if you will. And I was struck then by the memory of a session I saw of what do you call those guys who fly the planes so close to each other? Blue something or other. The shows that we see where we see those really incredible
The Blue Angels?
Blue Angels.
Blue
yeah.
Angels, there you go. So I saw a Blue Angel talk about what they do. And at one point, he basically said after every single session in which they do their work, they actually walk into a room. They purposely pull whatever rank they have off and they put it in a box. And they basically, as a symbol that we're all equal here, and we're going to talk about how we could improve what we do. And that reflects a little bit of what you were saying, Dan and Cheryl and Tara and the rest of you, really, in terms of this, that we have to have these kinds of conversations on a regular basis. I think it's going to be very powerful from that point of view. Jessica, as we come to an end, is there anything else that you would add?
I just say that, I think it's important to, and I'm not going to go over specific programs, but it's important for leadership to drive. Also, it's also important to be flexible. If we want to, bring more women into the organizations and get them into these roles, we may have to sometimes think of different avenues, whether it be reentry programs, providing, transportation for, women that may not have it. Those are things that, we've been starting to do. And then also just thinking about, the attractiveness for women. What are the cares and the needs? So in order to attract them, think about, most of these women, they're not just caring for children, but then many of them are the ones responsible for elder care as well. So do we have benefits that really would support them and allow them to be successful and happy and grow within our organizations? Those are just some additional things that I would add. And I think, everyone's probably already doing, as far when it comes to showcasing women outside externally from a marketing perspective, that's something I think everyone's already doing. But those are just some additional things I think I would add.
Thank you very much. And as we end, one of my learnings for the day is that I really never need slides, because the conversation always is fascinating if you get the right people in the room. So it's kind of cool from that point of view. I will ask those of you who are not. So Lisa, I'm just going to say,
No, I wanted you to
how we
understand.
say thank you to everybody instead of clapping on a mute basis. So let me see your hands. Thank you all.
Okay, so just before we
Thanks, Jerry.
close, I want to thank everyone that was on this call. We did have a question that maybe we can, if you all want to just answer to.
Pick one.
Suzanne, yes, is asked, is wondering if all of you are doing, or any of you are doing return to work programs. So we can spend maybe 30 seconds if anyone has a particular comment on that before I close. Tara or Cheryl or Dan, Jessica.
So we don't, it's actually one of our initiatives for this year. And as I mentioned, it came from leadership. That asked about that too. And that's why I mentioned reentry programs. It's one of the things we're looking into right now.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
And we've looked at it, but we've not done anything further with it. And a lot of that centers around making sure we're keeping customers safe more than anything else. And that's where it always gets tricky for us.
Yeah, the priorities these days right now are a little bit different. It's nice to be able to kind of segue and not talk about COVID for an hour.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm sure most of us will be going back and talking about that very shortly.
Yeah, we've
Yeah, I
done a
think-
couple. We've done a couple with our alumni, so not like open to everyone. Hey, come back to work, but people that have left us that we gotten back in touch with to say, hey, here's some opportunities. How do we make it easier for you? So but it's been on a smaller scale.
Well, Suzanne, I think you just gave us a nice new idea for perhaps another event. So I want to thank everyone for their time, our panelists. So yes, I'm giving you the virtual clap for your time and your insights. Just a reminder to everyone that's on this call and those that you know who may want to join SMA, we will make this recording and Jerry's awesome deck available on the SMA website so that you can have the statistics and the insights that were captured today. And last but not least, do keep an eye out for future SMA events. We are currently planning a virtual interviewing talk with some folks that do work with the software and give us some pros and cons. So look out for that next email. We're hoping to have that in May. And I wish you all a safe and healthy and happy week. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks again.